পছন্দ করতাম তাকে কবিতার বদলে এসে দিলে আমার যে কি হতো, এমন নয় যে কবিতা দিয়ে খুব ভালো হয়েছে, কিন্তু কিন্তু আই লিভড হ্যাপিলি এভার আফটার, কিন্তু আমার ধারণা যে থ্যাংক ইউ। সো আমার মনে হয় যে কবিতার সেইটাই জিতে যাওয়ার জায়গা, যে যে কথাটা হয়তো একটা নভেল ৫০,০০০ শব্দে বলছে, যে কথাটা হয়তো একটা এসে ৫,০০০ শব্দে বলছে, সেই একই কথা একটা কবিতা কিন্তু ৩০টা শব্দে বলতে পারে। আমার মনে হয় এই কারণেই কবিতা সবার আগে মানুষের মনে পৌঁছেছে, এবং কবিতা সহজতম মাধ্যম পড়ার জন্য, হয়তো লেখার জন্য কঠিনতম মাধ্যম।
Um, Actually, what he said is, Jeet, I'll just translate some of it for your benefit.
I was just wondering if you could turn the subtitles on.
the, what he said briefly was that poetry expresses something that, a, a, an essay or a novel can't. In the sense that poetry is a condensed form of expression, very crudely. This is a very crude translation, but it's something that takes a lot of skill to do. To express, when you have a 50,000 word limit, there's a lot you can really spread yourself. But if you're given 100 words in which to express a particular emotion,
You have to work
you
much
have to
harder.
work much harder. So, of all the things that you've done, music, novels, poetry, what special place does poetry occupy? Or how does it stand out? Is it something that you'd first do first before writing a novel, or maybe writing a song or singing a song? What special place does poetry hold?
I'm not the only one. I know that there are other writers of prose, fiction writers, novelists, who before they start working uh, on on a novel on a particular morning, prepare for it by reading poems, by reading great poetry, because when you read a beautifully crafted stanza, or a poem or a few poems, it puts a certain rhythm and a certain kind of compressed language in your head that then is a great source to draw on when you're writing prose. I think ambitious novelists read poetry in preparation for prose. Um, like a friend of mine said recently, um, poetry is prose in slow motion. I think that makes sense, whether you read poems or not.
Uh,
Sorry, and I also meant to say that all of that said, uh, we wouldn't be here if we didn't love poems and if we didn't love poetry. But I also have to say I hate it. I wish it. I sometimes feel like Christ when he said, "Pass this cup from me." I wish I didn't have to do it, because it is a curse. Like every gift is also a curse. And this is a tremendous curse, because really, you put so much into it, it takes 10 or 20 years before you even figure out what you're doing, before you get good at it. And it makes no money, as you know. Poets make no money at all. They usually work in obscurity for years and years. Nobody knows anything about them. They're not sitting up on stage like this talking about their work. They're just slaving away in a room, drinking too much and doing just the worst, taking the worst possible decisions. And you do that for years and years. It gets you nowhere in a big hurry. And, why would you want to do that to yourself? As I said, you have to have a really twisted kind of a sense of a very powerful self-destructive impulse to want to get into that kind of life in the first place. So really, my advice to all of you would be, don't do it.
Too late for you, certainly.
Way too late.
Well, a couple of days ago, Srijato participated in another session of the Kolkata Literary Meet titled Amar Prothom Kobita. And which is what I wanted to ask him, that because you worked as a journalist, you still are a journalist, and you write poetry. So, is poetry something that you can actually do in your spare time? এটা কি করা যায় যে আমার সময় মতো আমি দিনে 2 ঘন্টা কবিতা লিখলাম, এরকম তো হয় না, এরকম তো হয় না।
Firstly, there's a good news for you. I've quit my job, so I'm free now. So না, যেটা হচ্ছে যে কবিতা লেখা, it can't be an exercise. It can't be. You can't fix 2 hours from your daily routine and have poetry done. So you have to wait, sometimes for days, for weeks, and sometimes for years, might be. কারণ আমার ক্ষেত্রে এমন হয়েছে যে আমি একটা বই হয়তো লিখেছি যেটা 60 পাতা 64 পাতার বই, তারপরে I had to wait for 2 years to write another poem. So আমার মনে হয় it comes to you. You construct the outer things, হ্যাঁ, হ্যাঁ, কিন্তু যতক্ষণ না, until and unless the thought is coming to you, you are done. So you can't write it. So you can't figure out 2 hours or 3 hours from your daily routine to have poetry done. No, it's not the way.
um, in school and then in college, as a student of literature, I have read poets who sounded like they took 2 hours out every day and sat down and religiously wrote poetry. There are poets like that. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, I'm now safely out of the clutches of all my teachers and school, so I can turn around and say that I hated this person's poetry. I couldn't stand the romantic poets. I thought William Wordsworth was, I don't know, what was he talking about? Okay, at that point. But there is, I mean, the poetry does arouse very, very subjective, very, very deep reactions, I think. And for this reason, poets, probably more than any other literary sort of creators, have been the subject of censorship, of state monitoring, of all forms of state oppression. How when you're writing a poem, obviously you're not thinking of who this might offend or who this might cause pain to or whatever. You're putting down what you think on paper. How do you react? How would you react today to censorship, to somebody coming and saying, no, you can't write this, you can't, this is not your right?
I think this is nothing new. It goes back all the way to Plato, who in his book, The Republic, said, in the ideal state is one in which poets would not be allowed to enter. So in Plato's ideal state, there are no poets. And if you think about it, he was a very, very intelligent statesman to come up with this idea. He was absolutely right. Mao knew this too, that poets are the most dangerous of the citizens in a country, because there's a reason why poets were considered crazy back in the day. In Plato in fact said that poets are insane, and that is why they feel that they've been taken over by God or by the devil, and that they are speaking through somebody else's voice. And because of that, they can say things about the state. They can be critical about government, about the people in power, in a way that others cannot. And that is a very, very dangerous position to occupy. So if you're a smart statesman, you would ban poets. I'm just waiting for our prime minister to do something like that.
শ্রীজাত, একই প্রশ্ন তোমাকেও। নিন্দে হয়েছে তো নিশ্চয়ই, কবিতার প্রচুর নিন্দে ফেস করেছো, because I remember, this is a personal anecdote I'll share. When I first spoke to him, he seemed very surprised that anybody wanted to buy his poems, that anybody wanted to publish his poetry. He was quite mildly surprised about it. It was, but নিন্দেও তো হয়েছে নিশ্চয়ই।
নিন্দেই বেশি হয়েছে। এখনো নিন্দেই বেশি হয়। তার কারণ আমার মনে হয় যে what Jeet told that সেটা হচ্ছে যে কবিরা সবচাইতে বিপজ্জনক প্রজাতি। এখন হয়তো না, কারণ এখন কবিদেরও একটু দাম দিলে কেনা যায় অনেক জায়গায়। আমরা আমাদের সামনেও সেগুলো ঘটতে দেখছি, অ্যান্ড উই আর স্যাড অ্যাবাউট দ্যাট। কিন্তু কিছু কিছু মানুষ আছেন যাদের এখনো দে আর উইথ স্ট্যান্ডিং উইথ দেয়ার স্পাইনস অন, অ্যান্ড দে আর নট রেডি টু গেট সোল্ড। সো তারা প্রোটেস্ট করেন, তারা লেখেন, এবং থ্যাংক গড যে এখনো পর্যন্ত আমাদের রাজ্যে, আমাদের দেশে আমরা যেটা লিখছি এখনো ছাপা হচ্ছে। এইটুকু ফ্রিডম অফ স্পিচ উই আর গেটিং। কিন্তু নিন্দে প্রভূত হয়, আর নিন্দেকে হ্যান্ডেল করার একমাত্র উপায় হচ্ছে, একবার আমার মনে আছে যে আমি পড়েছিলাম কথামৃততে রামকৃষ্ণদেব বলেছিলেন যে ওই হাঁসের দুধ খাওয়ার মতো একটা ব্যাপার আছে, মানে দুধের সঙ্গে জল মিশিয়ে দিলে হাঁস ঠিক দুধটুকু খেয়ে নেয় আর জলটা পড়ে থাকে। দের সাম মেকানিজম দ্যাট ইট নোজ। তো একজন কবিকেও, একজন আর্টিস্টকেও সেরকম হতে হয়। নিন্দে করলে তার মধ্যে থেকে সমালোচনার অংশটুকু শুষে নিয়ে নিন্দে আর কুৎসাটাকে ফেলে দিতে হয়। তো এটা একটা লং প্র্যাকটিস, ইউ হ্যাভ টু প্র্যাকটিস ইট। তো সেইটা চেষ্টা করছি। এখনো পর্যন্ত নিন্দে গায়ে মাখি না, বরং নিন্দেটাকে আরেকটু এগিয়ে যাওয়ার জন্য আমার মনে হয় খুব ভালো একটা বুস্টিং একটা জিনিস, যে নিন্দে হচ্ছে মানে ইউ আর অন দ্য রাইট ট্র্যাক, ইউ আর ডুইং সামথিং ভেরি রাইট।
Jeet, you've had such a fantastically bizarre life thus far. You know, I don't know how many of you. We can't discuss all of it right here, right now. But any of you who know about his life, if you've read up about it, you'll know that it has been actually bizarre. I mean, I can't call it probably wonderful, but bizarre nonetheless. Your life must have shaped your poetry. Um, it's poets don't actually, do they react more to external influences, or do they react to what's happening in their own lives, inside their own souls? What was your sort of your life, how has your life impacted your poetry?
I think it's the other way around. I think it's the poetry that impacts the life. I think the most a significant thing that happened to me as a young person was at the age of 14, I was introduced to the French poet Baudelaire by my uncle, who was obsessed by Baudelaire. He was a lawyer in Kerala, and he had an entire room in his house, one of these old Kerala houses, that was devoted entirely to Baudelaire. All the books were either by or about Baudelaire. There were portraits of Baudelaire at different stages of his life. He was translating Baudelaire into Malayalam and died in the process. And by the way, it's not possible to translate the complete works of Baudelaire into a language by one person. It's too large. It's never been done. And he was in the process, he'd been in the process of doing that for many years. When he died, it was about half complete. Translation of Fleur du Mal, Baudelaire's great book, The Flowers of Evil, into Malayalam. And he said that I was his favorite nephew. I'm sure he told all his nephews this. But he made the great mistake of introducing me to Baudelaire at 14. I would never introduce a 14-year-old to Baudelaire, especially an impressionable 14-year-old. And I was very impressionable because I liked my uncle and I admired him. He was a real kind of personality. And I got sucked into the world of Baudelaire. And if you Google Baudelaire, you'll discover that really he is not a suitable role model for a 14-year-old. And I really blame Baudelaire for everything that happened to me subsequently, for all the disasters, for the bizarre life that you described. I blame it all on Charles.
Srijato?